Just wanted to remind folks that as we revised our bylaws, and I think I shared with you, we are in compliance and with the Open Meetings Act. So there is a public link for any members of the public who would like to observe the meeting. The meeting is also being recorded. I've asked folks to just let us know if any members of the public participate, so we'll be aware, but just wanted you to know that. And welcome, 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 everyone. I'm excited to have our first Board of Advisors meeting of this academic year. I am a little disappointed that we're not in person. Whatever variation of the breakfast reached you was just my attempt to say we look forward to a time when we're in person together, and a thank you for your time and attention. Before we go farther, I just want to give a shout out to PJ. Happy birthday, PJ. Thank you for spending some time with us on your birthday. And we are going to jump in a few minutes. I'm going to encourage those of you who are returning members to send any notes to the group in the chat so that we don't use our time just with welcomes today, but I am going to invite two new members of the Board of Advisors to say a little hello and something about them so we all get to meet them. And Ken, with your permission, I will ask you to kick us off.
Permission granted. Thanks, Shirley. Good morning, everyone. I've met some of you obviously through the nomination process, so good to see some of you again. Great to see all of you again, echoing Shirley's sentiment. Wish I could have participated with all of you in person. My name is Ken Mills. I'm the president and CEO of a company called Regenix Bio, which is probably about a half mile, maybe less, from the USG campus, just right near Shady Grove Hospital. We're a medicines company, a therapeutics company that's focused on gene therapy. We employ about 350 people in Rockville mostly, although obviously have drawing people from Virginia, DC. We also have a small office in New York. I've been at Regenix Bio for about 10 years. I was one of the founders of it before Regenix Bio. I've always worked in biotech and in Maryland. In my professional career, I moved here in the mid-90s, and before Regenix Bio worked also in Rockville at a company called iGen and later Mesoscale Discovery, which is still around and employing probably another 500 people in the county. I've lived in, I think, 4 separate school clusters in Montgomery County since I moved here in the mid-90s. I have 2 teenagers. That's most of my hobby and occupation otherwise outside of work. And but originally I'm actually from Albany, New York, and spent some time in Boston. But Maryland's my home now, coming on almost 25 years, and really excited to support Anne and be a part of this great Board of Advisors. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, welcome, Ken. We're thrilled to have you. I'm also going to invite Dr. Dukes. I think this might be your first meeting with us. If you wouldn't mind saying hello. We all know you well, but thrilled to have you participate.
Good morning, and I'm delighted to be able to be on the call this morning and to see so many good friends, in addition to my trustee, Dr. Britnall. So I'm Charlene Duke, serving as interim president of Montgomery College as the college goes through the search process for its next president. Many of you know that I served at Prince George's Community College for 25 years and the last 13 as president of the college. So it's good to be back in the real space of higher education, even though I've never left it in terms of some of the work that I do with my consulting company, Dukes LLC. I appreciated the comment, Mr. Mills, that you were making about family. I am a new first-time grandmother, so I'm certainly enjoying my 8-month-old grandson, and just delighted to be here and to serve Montgomery County in this capacity for the next several months. Thank you for having me.
Thrilled to have you. Thank you for sharing those words, and congratulations. And then I'd also like to invite our new student council president to introduce herself and share some words.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Zahal. I am with the University of Maryland Biological Sciences program here at USG. I am from Afghanistan. I came to the US when I was 12 years old. So back in 2013, I started 8th grade with no English, but with the support of my family and teachers, I was able to overcome challenges and finish high school in 3 years. And then I started taking classes at USG. Then I transferred to at Montgomery College. Then I transferred to USG. And at the beginning, I did not know much about USG. But then my advisor counselor told me about the TERP transfer program, and I realized that USG is a better option for me because it is very diverse. Class sizes are very small compared to the College Park, and you get more one-on-one chance with the professors, and also it's very convenient to commute. And also, in addition to studying, I also work because of life's challenges. I work at my eye doctor in Bethesda, and my career goal is to become an optometrist because growing up, I saw my own family suffer from eye diseases that went on undiagnosed and untreated because of the lack of professionals. Which is why I want to become an optometrist. I think being able to help people see and read is very impactful and valuable. And so I love working with the community, which is also why I run for the student council. I want to listen to student challenges and be their voice because since I came here with no English, I received so much support from my school, college, university. So now I want to listen to those students and help them handle challenges. And I want to create like a sense of togetherness, like a positive support system, so everyone feels motivated to be included. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome and wonderful to have you. And we're all about the sense of inclusiveness. Please feel free to call on us as the Board of Advisors to help support the work you do with students in any way. Okay, I'm going to invite all the veteran board members to continue to share greetings in the chat. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kademian.
Thank you, Shirley. I'm going to take about 10 minutes to give an update on the year. I'm nearing my 1-year anniversary. I started on October 20th, all on Zoom. I was coming to the campus regularly with the security team was here and some of the IT team was here, and we were all meeting on Zoom, and so it's a pleasure to be with you all today, this morning, at this time to reflect and to think forward. We are opening up the campus. People are wearing masks. People are being very cautious with health and safety. We are learning to manage COVID. I heard some optimistic news this morning that we might be reaching the peak of the Delta outbreak, but I think we'll be continuing to manage this for some time. So we're getting better at that. We have a strong health and safety team that's helping us navigate that. Wonderful to see the students on campus as well. I'm learning to navigate the layers that are USG, multiple layers, big system, big network, getting to know all of you, the Board of Advisor members, getting to know colleagues across all of our partnerships. I will say great big welcome to Dr. Charlene Dukes, to Ken Mills, to Zuhal as our newest board members, really enjoying working with Dr. Dukes and with Dr. McKnight, MCPS and Montgomery College, working with all of our academic partners in the system. So just really learning how to be and how to navigate and how to understand this whole system. And in the midst of that, starting the strategic planning process, starting with a big deep dive and then into the strategic planning process. And in a moment, we'll talk more about that, but I will just say what an honor it is to be working with Professor Ike Leggett as a co-chair in this process. It's absolutely wonderful. So just a few observations, and then we'll go into the strategic planning process over this year. My first big observation is what an opportunity we have here for absolutely transformational work in higher education and across Montgomery County. I use the analogy of kind of chess pieces, pieces on a chessboard that are all kind of glittering and shimmering, waiting for their next move to really do something exciting and align all the energy that is here. in Montgomery County and in the system as well. We have work to do to build the next generation ecosystem in Montgomery County for education, to really focus on workforce and workforce experience and pathways, to build those pathways, to reach beyond the marketing that we do for individual institutions and the enrollment management we do, to really focusing on pathways to big career opportunities and what that would look like and how we would manage that. The deep partnerships that we have with Montgomery College and with MCPS and with all of our university partners and with Maryland Technology Council and Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and Workforce Montgomery and all kinds of partnerships. So there's so much will, so much opportunity. The chess pieces are aligning, I think, in a really exciting way. And it's so exciting to see how Shady Grove can be part of that and help foster that as well. But with that, I observe a lot of challenges, big challenges. And, one thing that really, two statistics that really stand out to me is one that our Montgomery College colleagues have shared is that 70% of the jobs in Montgomery County require four-year degrees, 70%. And 74% of higher education students across America, 74% of higher education students across America are non-traditional students. They work, they have families, taking care of children, they're paying their own way, they're looking for flexibility, they're looking for lots of different kinds of higher education options beyond being on a campus for a four-year degree program. So those two statistics are quite powerful and really make a strong case for innovation and for change. The questions we have here at Shady Grove are a number, and I'll just queue up some of these questions. How do we plan and deliver programming that is timely, that is relevant, that is integrated and deeply connected with all of our partners and inclusive of employers? How do we move to a system that can respond quickly in bringing programming and meeting the demands that are here? Another challenge we have is, you've all heard me say we're not the 13th campus in the University System of Maryland. We are an asset. We are part of the University System of Maryland, an asset to our partners, an asset to the system and to Montgomery County. So beyond the 13th campus, what are the services? What's the expertise? What's the thought leadership that USG can build and provide to be that catalyst for educational innovation and opportunity with our partners? Another challenge we have is, what is the funding model that will support this work and help us scale this work? How do we fund the work that USG does in a way that can grow and help us scale? And then how do we build the capacity of USG itself to do this work? Build our talent, build our governance, build our strategic discretion here to be able to take some direction from time to time as well. So those are some of the big challenges that we're facing as we go into the strategic planning process, as well as the opportunities that we are facing. And I just want to share just a few things that are happening, a few reflections on what's happening right now. We are working with Dr. Dukes, working with Dr. McKnight, working with our teams, working with the county council, thinking about what is the post-COVID vision. Where do we start digging in to really address the equity challenges we saw during the pandemic and even before the pandemic? How do we start building out ACEs in a really strong and sustainable way and grow ACEs? And how do we start building out additional pathways across Montgomery County? So we've been challenged by the county council back in March by Councilmember Craig Rice and Councilmember Hans Riemer and the other members of their committees to think big and bold about the future and to really find a path forward that can be the post-COVID, economic recovery, job creating, educational equalizing kind of vision. And so we've got our work cut out for us, but we're excited to be engaged with our partners in thinking that through. We also are really focused right now, as we're strategically planning, but on the immediate opportunities, which is really focusing on the life sciences and focusing on the opportunities. We're a partner with the system, with Montgomery College, and with Montgomery County on an MOU for building out the talent and research around the life sciences. We recently signed an MOU, or getting ready to sign an MOU with the Economic Development Corporation, with MCEDC, to collaborate more across the county on a variety of things. We're starting with an equity incubator, which was just launched thanks to a grant from MCEDC. It'll be an opportunity over 8 weeks for entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups to have support, mentoring support, and to compete for funding as well. That's going to be hosted by our Lab for Entrepreneurship. And also, we just recently received a grant to help plan for some work we want to do around measuring the impact of pathway work, and particularly pathway work focused on entrepreneurship as well. So there's some exciting possibilities that we're trying to build into our strategic plan as well. And then, you all have been deeply involved in the JCR report, and we recently, working with the system, we recently submitted our first update, a quarterly update for the year to the legislature. And it was very focused on the strategic plan work that is underway and the priorities associated with that. So with that, Shirley, I will pause if you want to do a transition to the next round, but those are my reflections on the first year, some big picture reflections, and just an update on some things that are happening here at Shady Grove.
If any board members have any questions about opening semester, otherwise we'll roll right into the strategic plan. I think we're all on one screen, so if you use the raise your hand function, I'll see you. Seeing none, Anne, why don't we move on to the substantive work?
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for that opportunity. So I'm going to ask first my co-chair, Ike Leggett. Ike, would you like to share a few opening thoughts on how the strategic planning process is going and any observations that you have? Oh, Ike, you're on mute.
Let me first of all thank Anne for her tremendous work and leadership on a rather difficult challenge, that is to come in new, to assume a leadership role on a very key item, that is develop a new strategic plan, and to do it essentially virtually. With a very large committee, a lot of different voices around the table, or at least across the screen. And I think she's done a tremendous job of leading us and guiding us with her staff thus far. But let me also apologize because I'm currently in West Virginia on top of a mountain that the connection may be dropped here or there, but if it is, I apologize in advance. As indicated before, we are well on the way of the strategic plan with an effort to probably bring at our next meeting some at least first development of a draft that we would hope to have ready a little bit later on this fall. It is centered around a concept that I think at first gave some people a little bit of hesitation. But when you look at it and you peel away all of the pieces, it is a concept that takes some of the current fundamental concept that you would find in most strategic plans, but organizes in a way that I think can provide us with an opportunity to go forward. Because essentially what you're doing with a strategic plan is provide a pathway, develop a plan for which we can ultimately implement over a period of time. It needs to be inspirational, but it needs to also be foreseeable, something that is operational. Operational in a sense that we can get behind it, work hard on it, and essentially pull things together. There are three essential components, what we call a hedgehog, that divides the general concept in three areas. Our passion, what it is that we are passionate about in USG, what we can be best at, and of course, looking at our economic engine, because anything that we develop, we need to make certain that it is sustainable and doable. And with that, we have a flywheel that looks somewhat cumbersome, has various components, but it's designed for all of us to put our hands behind the wheel, to engage in an aggressive way, to implement our passion, what we're best at, and enhance our economic engine. And the various components come together. But one of the things that I want to emphasize to people when you look at it, do not become somewhat overly dramatic about the concept in terms of the name, but look very carefully at the components therein. And you will notice there's something that I think is clear here, that the implementation, the flywheel that allows us to all work together. So what we have ultimately from this strategic plan will be something that we will have to continue to work on. We will have to continue to put our hands and our muscles behind this wheel to make sure that we implement. There may be changes there too. We may develop other components of the flywheel and other things that we need to do in order to implement. And so when you look at ultimately what we will place together, keep those concepts in mind. It needs to be at some point doable. It needs to be visionary, but we need to understand that it is a continuous work in progress. And this is why I think Ann's leadership is so important to this, because we're all emphasizing that this is not a plan we simply take, set it on the shelf and walk away from. But the flywheel allows us to form later committees, continue to work aggressively on it. And this is what you're going to see from this one forward. We are thinking big. There will be some things that may appear to be out of the box, but we're also thinking in an operational, sustainable way. And we're trying to balance those things in such a way that I think our community, and we are looking to balance a number of factors. What does it say internally to our students, to our staff, to our instructors, but also what does it say to the community? We don't want to simply be insulated and talk only to ourselves, but talk broadly to the community. So we're trying to strike a balance here that speaks both internally and externally as well. Again, this is a work in progress, but we've made tremendous work. And I want to thank all of the members of the committee who participated. We've had some very, very aggressive sessions. We've been working at this for a period of time. And the participation, I think, overall has been excellent. So I'll turn it back to you, Ann. Again, thank you for your tremendous leadership.
Thank you so much, Ike. That's a wonderful overview of where we are in this process and great insight on the concepts that we're using as well. We were challenged by Chancellor Furman and by Board of Regents Chair Linda Gooden to be bold, as Ike said, and to take this moment to really think big for Shady Grove. And so we are trying to do that, take that charge seriously. And I think it's a very exciting, as I said earlier, I think it's a very exciting opportunity for us. I'm going to share with you first the hedgehog and the flywheel. And as Ike said, the hedgehog is a concept that comes from Jim Collins in The Good to Great, as does the flywheel. But in between showing you the hedgehog and the flywheel, I'm going to try to center a few pieces around the flywheel that will hopefully help understand it a little bit better, what I'm calling some of the drivers of change, some of the levers of change. So I'm going to share my screen with all of you here. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So the hedgehog concept is the idea of a hedgehog is also, you might say, the vision for Shady Grove going forward. And Jim Collins says the hedgehog is an animal that does one thing really well. And it continues to do that thing really well, even to the extent of conquering a fox who might be clever and trying lots of different things. But the hedgehog stays focused on what its core purpose is, what the thing that it can do really well, and succeeds in this tale between the hedgehog and the fox. And so the hedgehog is the intersection of what we're most passionate about, what we could be best at USG, and our economic engine. This is the result of lots of discussion in our committee and lots of discussion across USG and with our executive council, and lots and lots of input. And I'm sure we will end up tweaking and adjusting a little bit more, but we're very close now to I think our workable hedgehog here. The passion that we focused on is transforming lives in the community through innovation and education for all. It's why we all get out of bed in the morning. We care about our students, the educational opportunities. We care about Montgomery County and growing and building Montgomery County. So the passion is at that intersection of what we all care about. What could we be best at? Not necessarily what we are right now, but what could we be best at? And we've identified creating a place of innovation here at Shady Grove through collaboration with all of our partners to plan and build and measure and assess and strengthen student-centered pathways for affordable, accessible, and competitive lifelong learning and community wealth building in the region. People get great jobs, they stay here, they grow families and lives and businesses here as well. So this is really focusing our attention on what does a system of pathways look like, and how can we build that student-centered, equitable, affordable education in service to all of our partners, in service to our students in Montgomery County. And then the economic engine, we haven't identified specific sources of funding, but if we do this well, it will drive investment from a wide range of sources to build bold, competitive higher education opportunities that directly impact local and regional workforce and economic development for the public good. So the focus is on, if we do this right, it will drive investment from the state in partnership, from our business partners, from our partners in the University System of Maryland, from the county. We want to think big and bold about this and think about how our partnership integrates with all of the missions and goals of our partners as well. All right, the hedgehog then, the vision that comes out of all of that, what's at the intersection, is inspiring, innovating, and transforming educational pathways to create a world-class and equitable economy of the future. So cutting-edge economy where everyone is earning a great income and more equitable in the outcomes as well. That's the hedgehog, that's the vision where we are right now. I want to share with you before I share with you the flywheel, I want to share a few levers of change that are in the flywheel. And I want to start with a quick story. Some of you have heard me tell the story, but I think it's a compelling anecdote for where we are. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I also host a podcast, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I discovered one recently called The Fluid Fan by Angela Ruggiero. She's a former ice hockey Olympian. And when she was starting her career in the business of women's sports, she noted that there was a standard model for business in sports. And that model was the dedicated fan, the fan that's very stable, who has a lifelong commitment to a team, who watches and follows that team, who buys season's tickets, who buys the gear for that team, and their family continues to follow that team as well. And the sports business model follows that the sports business model works on maintaining that stable fan and attracting and keeping and supporting that stable fan. That model has worked really well for sports for a very long time. But what Angela Ruggiero and her team at the Sports Innovation Institute have discovered is that their research shows, especially people who follow women's sports, is that fans are becoming more and more fluid, that they watch on their phones, they double screen, they watch on a screen and they're doing research on their phone about the athlete. They participate in a wide range of gambling possibilities. They participate in efforts to, in virtual sports as well. They follow multiple teams, but they really follow individual athletes as well. And they're very interested in the narrative around individual athletes. She calls this the future fan or the fluid fan. And the insight for me was that higher education has many of the same business model practices, and I think the same challenge. Our traditional higher education model is that of a dedicated student who goes to a campus, who lives on the campus, who eats on the campus, celebrates on the campus. And when they become an alumnus, they continue to support that campus as well. And we are very focused on that traditional student model in higher education. And it's been very, very successful. But that statistic that I shared with you at the beginning of my comments earlier, 74% of students in some type of higher education now are non-traditional students. And they are the fluid student. And so our challenge is, how do we drive higher education in a way that meets the needs of the future student, of the more fluid student, if you will? And our students at Shady Grove represent this non-traditional, highly driven, highly motivated student. And I think we can bring a lot to the table in doing that. That idea of the future student is at the heart of the work that we are doing. It builds on the knowledge and passion for students at USG that we have here. When we started this process, we would ask people, what are we passionate about? And everyone to a T said, our students and our student success. And we're really good at supporting the transfer student. That is clear that is something over 20 years that USG has become very, very good at. Our partners know a lot about our students as well, no doubt, but our students are here. Our team here at USG really understands the students, and we can build on that through this future fan approach or future student approach. And I'll say more about that as we go along. Some of the levers.
Could I interrupt?
Yeah, please. I'm sorry.
I
don't see you. I'm sorry. Hang on. Let me.
All right. This is Ike. Could I interrupt 1 second and
yes,
just
please,
add
Ike, please.
A parallel to the sports analogy? It's a very good one, but at the heart of the fans' enthusiasm, both future and current fans, the people who buy the ticket, who buy all of the paraphernalia, who go to the games, who support, seek the autographs, all the other kinds of things that show support, is that they see the team as either competitive now or will be competitive in the future. Fans' loyalty will soon dissipate to some degree if they believe that the team in any sport is not competitive. And so Beverly used to say to us in our meetings that we have to be competitive. And if we are competitive at USG, we build that fan base both for current and for future students as well. So underneath that fan enthusiasm, underneath those students, underneath the faculty recruitment, is that we have to be seen in many ways as a competitive place in which people want to come. And this is why this passion and the drive is so important for us, because in order to build that fan base, they must see that value, and that value must be, in their minds, competitive to an investment that they would see somewhere else.
Thank you, Ike. That's fantastic. And hopefully we have started to build that into the flywheel as well. So thank you so much. So building on this, how do we transform relationships? I think our biggest challenge is, how do we go from hosting and accommodating and supporting partners to being a partner in innovation and in scaling? And I've put the 1% here. You all have heard me talk about, we're not asking our partners to completely flip themselves upside down and start new. We're asking for some investment, some commitment to the innovation and possibilities of the pathway building and work here that can have a bigger effect down the road, but really trying to get that initial investment in building this innovation capacity and building this ability to scale as well. And there are a couple of components to that. What is the capacity that we need to build here that adds value for our partners, that can catalyze the potential of systemness of our system within USM and within the Montgomery County ecosystem as well? This is something Kevin has also reminded me of many times, and this is what Jim Collins really focuses on. Who's at the table is really important. So we have to build our expertise from within with our team here and through our partnerships. And we have to also grow and develop new talent here as well to be able to meet these priorities. I think another piece of this transformational leadership is thought leadership. Shady Grove has a role to play in the thought leadership around innovation, in the thought leadership around pathways, in the thought leadership around community wealth building, and really cultivating that thought leadership here with our partners, with our expertise here, this is a really important part of getting the flywheel to turn as well. Targeted resources and buy-in to build a proof of concept. Another key to this transformative relationship will be our ability to have resources, to be able to build on pilots, to target key opportunities, to bring some discretionary strategic direction to what we do. This will be key to our future and to turning the flywheel. And then being able to scale with each turn of the flywheel, being able to adjust the partnerships we're supporting, the capacity we're building here to be able to continue to grow the student base here in a competitive way, in a very competitive way. And then, of course, another key to our success here, foundational, is diversity, equity, and inclusion that is embedded in all we do, and a focus on our role as a partner in this community and community wealth building and capacity building, and being dedicated to continuous improvement. As Ike said earlier, we don't want this flywheel to sit on the shelf. This is something we're going to constantly engage and work towards. Okay. I can't see all of you while I'm sharing my screen, so if you want to stop me, or if you have a question or something, just jump in. Just jump in, no problem. So this is our flywheel, and Jim Collins describes the flywheel. He says it is, it's a big metal wheel and engines that is really tough to get going at first, but as you get the momentum going, it builds in energy and starts flying eventually and taking things around. But getting those first 2 turns around the flywheel is really tough. And so we know there's a lot of work to do here. We start at the top with creating a diverse and inclusive educational and workplace experience for the future student, for the future employee, for the future partner, to create a world-class and equitable economy of the future. And this doesn't mean that we don't focus on our current students and our current situation, because we are working very hard to build our current capacity and our current talent. But change comes by leaning into the future and being ready for the future and watching where, as Angela Ruggiero would say, where the puck is headed. I think Mike Knapp says that too. I think Mike Knapp is also uses that great analogy. That leads to our first steps, which is working with our current partners, working with our current programs to build out pathways and to generate opportunity. And so really starting to work with our existing programs to start thinking more holistically across pathways with our university partners, with MC, with FCC, with MCPS, to really start thinking about how we take what exists and turn them to stronger pathways. But from that, you can't help but measure and assess. You want to know, what's the impact of that? What are the consequences? How is it impacting enrollments and student success and workforce and economic development? So there's a whole assessment piece to this that we need to build to be that source of insight in that process. And then the next step is, how do you innovate academic planning to design, build, and grow scalable, sustainable, student-centered pathways for the lifelong learners? Innovation comes from what we learn. When we measure and assess, we can innovate because we see the gaps, we see the possibilities, we see the challenges, and that leads to innovation, which leads to enhancing the competitiveness of career-ready graduates for opportunities in high-demand areas, which leads to building community wealth when they get great jobs and invest in the community, which leads to expanded partnerships, which will drive investment and which will hopefully grow USG's reputation. Let me pause there really quickly and see if anybody has any questions about the flywheel. I'll say a little bit more about it, but any immediate questions about the flywheel?
No questions, Ann, but I would like to make the comment that as the board looks at these 2 structures that Ann and Ike have presented and are presenting to us, we really want you to think about where you are in that process. We want you to feel a part of this. We want you to embrace it, to question it, to truly own it, and help determine which direction all this goes.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Kevin.
that, Kevin. And I see Jorge has his hand up.
Hi, thank you. The flywheel concept is, I think it provides a great framework there is one question that I had, and that is that as Greg had mentioned, and Dr. Kalemian as well, the fan, a focus on the student, a focus on the fan needs to come with a very strong understanding of how they make decisions, what drives their preferences. So if we bring it from a kind of a consumer focus, perhaps what I would suggest is that there should be an area in this flywheel to really thoroughly understand the perceptions. If we know the perceptions of the students at Montgomery College, at MCPS, about what drives their decision and their families, when they're and you have a high likelihood that there will be non-traditional students based on these statistics. So if we understand that strongly, then you can craft the entire process to make sure that the preferences are met, because otherwise building the kind of building it and expecting that they come may not be sufficient enough.
Jorge, I'm so glad you said that, because I think I think you're absolutely right. I think the key to this success, and we put this in the center of the wheel, that USG creates the future student, but the future student creates USG in this wheel, right? The future student, we need to be tuned in and understanding the future student in a really powerful way. I think that's a big part of measuring, assessing the impact of pathways, is understanding the experience. In the Fluid Fan project, they focus on fan behavior. So it's not demographics, it's the behavior. What decisions are they making? What are the challenges they're facing? How are they navigating those challenges? And I think that's to your point, Jorge, is that it's their perceptions, it's their experience, it's their behavior that is most important in this. And we need to understand that as a big part of being able to do this right. So thank you so much for bringing that point up. I think it's absolutely right on. Any other? Okay, and thank you, Kevin, for challenging us all to see ourselves in this wheel and to be thinking about what we all can do to make it turn, but also where we might need to articulate it differently as well. Thank you so much for that. Let me just go to a couple more slides here. As we're working through this process, there's ongoing work happening at Shady Grove. And so I wanted to share some of the first steps and insights that we are kind of focused on empirically and in practice that could be parts of some of the first steps around implementing the flywheel. We are working on, with our partners across Montgomery County, we've been engaged in a conversation about what comes next. What's the next educational paradigm for Montgomery County? And there is tremendous institutional collaboration and political will to take some bold steps in this area. We have strong pathway partnerships and some really interesting mechanisms to strengthen those pathways, like the dual education, the early education, the possibility of students having tuition support for coming back and supporting Montgomery County or supporting Montgomery County Public Schools. Another big piece of this that we've been working on is career readiness. Our student services team has been really zoomed in for a number of years on career readiness and how to help our students be ready to step into the job on day one, and how can that career readiness focus become the focus of how we approach student support more generally, a tremendous value add for our students and for Montgomery County businesses. And then really focusing on employer engagement as well, and how we not just engaging employers, but how can we build a system that is very inclusive of employers for what we're teaching and how we're teaching it, and the education of our students in partnership as well. I think that's another key part. The other aspect of this that we're really focused on is building the infrastructure through partnerships to connect talent needs and job opportunities to the life sciences. We have a $175 million gorgeous building right here. We had a group of entrepreneurs here the other day. The Maryland Technology Council, Marty hosted this along with Brad Stewart from MCEDC and Councilmember Hans Riemer to visit and think about the challenges that these entrepreneurs are facing in the life sciences. It was so insightful to understand more of the detail of where we can partner and how we can partner to help build this pathway in the life sciences for our students in ways that is compatible and supportive of the efforts of entrepreneurs and businesses in this area as well. And so we are thinking deeply about some of the ways we can do that. And three of the kind of three possibilities are in the works, and through a variety of different conversations we're having around the MOU and around grant opportunities as well. One is focusing really on the infrastructure for networking and mentoring opportunities in the life sciences, coupled with experiential learning and internships along the lifelong learning spectrum. So we've got a team working hard on this to really understand how we can best build that. So our academic partners, our university partners, it's not up, they don't have to build this every time they come as a partner in a separate program. There should be an infrastructure here that they can plug into, that they can really focus on the curriculum and their students, and we can provide the infrastructure for this networking support in the life sciences and learn from that and do it in a lot of other pathway areas as well. We're very focused on research opportunities with corresponding educational points of focus. We've been in a lot of conversations with IBBR about how we partner to create a pathway of research education experiences for our students. And then really thinking about USG as a data hub with analytical insights. So in addition to being able to understand the student, being able to understand the opportunities, the demands, the needs, and being a place where we can pull a lot of that together and convene around that for purposes of planning and filling those needs in the county. So for the board, thinking about some of the areas, picking up on Kevin's point, kind of challenging us all to think about this, I've highlighted some of the areas for board engagement in the strategic plan. We started off with a vision session with the Board of Advisors. You all participated in a fantastic session that was very insightful for us in kicking off the hedgehog and kicking off the flywheel. And of course, we have a number of you are serving on the strategic planning committee as well and have been participating in a wide range of sessions around that. We've also had a number of workshops held throughout the session, and a lot of you have been participating in those workshops too that have been kind of thought leadership ideation sessions to get to challenge us in this process. Going forward, once the strategic plan committee finishes its work on the flywheel, we will break into work groups, and these work groups will capture what's around the flywheel. And we're going to be inviting members of the Board of Advisors to be part of those work groups, to serve on those work groups, to bring your specific expertise so we can start thinking about service lines and projects and initiatives and goals within each of those areas, to start to really articulate what happens in detail in the flywheel in the strategic planning process. And we're going to continue to engage in whiteboard sessions and one-on-one sessions. I've had the opportunity to engage with some of you one-on-one around the flywheel, and the whiteboard sessions we've been holding have been fantastic. So we'll continue to hold those throughout this process and to invite all of you to participate in those. And then what we're going to be talking about today, thought leadership is a big part of the future of USG in the areas that we want to prioritize. And so there's a lot of opportunity for convenings, bringing people together in order to explore and to be a home for some of the big thinking, transformative thinking in the areas in which we want to partner on and lead on as well. So Shirley, I'll stop there and turn it back to you.
I had one observation to make, Ann.
Yes, please.
Yeah. There's always some areas whereby there may be a question or some concern. And I want us to go back for just one moment to look at the hedgehog, the vision.
Okay, let me share that again. I'll share that again, Ike. Yeah.
And we have the
Can you see that, Ike?
we have the three bold concepts here that are reflected of a pretty bold vision. There's one that has given me some pause or questions all along. It's not the passion, it's not what it is we want to be best at. It's the economic engine part. And I would admit that I have some concerns about that. And it comes as a result of the fact that USG in the educational circles of higher education is somewhat unique. At one point, it has been difficult to describe how our institute plays such an important part in the overall system. And on one hand, we have some levels of independence, but on the other hand, we are really dependent upon our partners. And so in order to be more effective in the economic engine concept, it is a huge question for us of how do you do that under the current economic structure that we have. And thinking boldly, thinking big, this is something that I think will give us some level of pause of how do we straddle our status in the current operational structure that we have in the system. Because in order to fully take advantage of our ability to do many of the things that provide us with the stability that we need, this needs to be reevaluated. This is not a new subject, but it's a continuation of a debate that we've had for some time. And as you've indicated before, Mike Knapp has constantly stated that, well, to be effective, as Wayne Gretzky said, you fly where the puck is going, not where it is today. I'm not sure where this puck is going on the economic engine portion of it. And so we will have to spend a great deal of time trying to assess this, to make sure that our models conforms to what we should be doing with our partners within the system, but also giving us some level of independence in order to make sure that the economic engine component is something that we ultimately can fulfill. So this one, in my opinion, will be one that will cause us a great deal of analysis and work in order to fulfill it anywhere near what our visionary statement has made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ike. And Ike, I will just add to that. Thank you for that. And I will add that it's also contingent on a shift in the way our partners understand our role in the university system in Maryland, and to see us as more than a place where degrees are offered, and more as a partner in that effort, as a partner in innovation and a partner in meeting the demands of Montgomery County. So there has to be a shift as well in how, in the role that we can play in the capacity that we provide, that fiscal model needs to support. Okay, thank you, Shirley. I'll stop there. And
thank you, Anne. Thank you, Ike. I think this all brings us back to Kevin's point, which is there's been a lot of good thinking that's only going to generate more deep thinking. So the phase that we're going into that Anne was outlining, the work groups, the brainstorming, the one-on-one, is to take some of this framework now and struggle with it and have it result in real recommendations. There's a wonderful connection. Oh, Nancy King, let me recognize Senator King.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And Shirley, thank you so much for, I know it was your idea of the breakfast thing. Thank you. I think one of the frustrations that I have and my fellow legislators have, we've gone through this for many years, is trying to make the general public and the rest of the legislature understand what USG is. I mean, everybody jumps up and they say they're going to participate and do anything that they can to help us. But I think when it comes down to it, if there's anything at all that's a threat to their own little program, then we get kind of left out of the matrix. And I just think there's got to be an easier education process for people to understand the uniqueness of USG and how great it can be. I'm just not sure how to do that. That's all.
If I might comment, Ms. King, you've got to go back 20 years to understand this. I mean, I've been trying to come up to speed on that, why here in Montgomery County that we still don't know what USG is as a community. And I think it has to do with the fact that it was intentionally vague, that the focus was on the university partners. We have tremendous university partners in this, but I think the identities of each of those partners was trying to be preserved, not to create a trying to think, some vagueness around it, but trying to create a university system here that was available, but no one knew about it. So I think it was intentional out of the box. And unfortunately, we've not had leadership over time that's allowed, and I'm not anyone in particular, but at the system level, we've not really embraced regional centers. And I think now we're at that point where we've got a 20-year history of success. You got to at least acknowledge it, and now you've got to truly figure out what to do with it. So like it starts now. It really does start now.
So I'm going to consolidate those points. I see your hand up, Michael Pretty. I'm going to recognize you as the last question before we turn it over, because I do want Board of Advisors members to know that the system itself is going through a strategic planning process as well. And we've had some questions about alignment and how this fits into that vision. So Ellen is up next. Michael, I'll allow you a short question before we turn it over to her.
It's more of a short comment. You know, I don't want to kind of rehash some of the territory on how our system is not necessarily reflective of the needs for Montgomery County or the students, but I just want to reflect back on just the students. So the students, when they come up through Montgomery College or any other participating institution, they don't articulate very well to the system. So when we talk about a pathway, we talk about trying to create a way where they can go from basically Montgomery College through their baccalaureate. And so when we look at a financial model, or we look at how to create opportunity for students, we have to be able to make sure we articulate those degrees from the institution to institution. That's the first major challenge we have to solve, because students are actually being told when they come into the transfer process, the 3 to 5 of their classes don't transfer. So I think if we can manage the pathway better, it should answer a lot of questions for us for how to structure this institution to make it very effective for the people that are coming in that really need help.
I appreciate that charge, and we'll actually come to talk to it later in the agenda, and picks up on where Jorge was leading us, right, which is really thinking about the student decision-making and the student opportunity at the center of all this. Thank you for that comment. I'm going to, Ellen, turn it over to you and ask you to share with us a little bit of where these processes are going to intersect and what thoughts there are about the future of the regional higher education centers and supporting them.
Well, thank you, Shirley, for your leadership, for the breakfast, and for asking me to talk a little bit about the system level strategic planning process. I think it fits very nicely with following on Anne's remarks. And I also want to thank Anne for being so inclusive of system folks in all these workshops. I've attended each one. And I think it's been a wonderful process, Anne, a really deep, thoughtful process. So for the first strategic plan developed by Shady Grove, I think we're in good hands. I've mentioned to some of you in the past that the system itself is also in the process of updating its strategic plan. I wanted to say a few words about process just to ground everyone into how this works, and then a few words about content, but keep that really short and leave time for questions if I may. So most of the institutions have individual strategic plans. When the system is talking about a strategic plan, process, and plan, it's talking about one that's at the system level. That, I think, naturally requires a lot of engagement with not only the universities and the regional centers, but a very large external stakeholder group. So our process is driven by a lot of stakeholder engagement. Our existing strategic plan runs through 2020, so a little behind, and was updated in 2018. I'll also acknowledge that on this call, we have a few folks who are very engaged, as well as I am, in the system strategic plan. We have Dr. Boffman, Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at the system level, who is very engaged in multiple parts of the strategic planning process and content. And then Regent Leggett, One of the things that's different in the process we are in the midst of this time around from what it's been in the past is the regents have been much more involved all throughout the process. In the past, they were, let's say, episodically involved until we had a work product in draft form for them to start putting input into. This time around, the chair of the Board of Regents, Linda Gooden, formed a strategic plan working group of regents, and Regent Leggett is on that group. It's chaired by Jeff Ganella. As well, they formed a work group on enrollment, which covers not just recruiting and accepting of students, but all kinds of initiatives around retention and graduation of all students throughout the system. And I think you'll see in the strategic plan for the system, transfer students are an incredibly important part. I believe it's about 1/3 of all of our students, Joe, are transfer students in the system. We've been at this for almost a year now. Our intent is to publish an approved plan that the board has approved in December of this year. Our process involved baselining the current state, blueprinting what the future state looked like. So we've engaged an outside consulting firm, Huron, just as Anne has brought in somebody from the outside. It's always helpful when you're trying to think long-term and strategically to bring somebody in from the outside to do what others have told all of you, which is to think boldly, think big, think broadly. So Huron has been our partner in this. They've done an external data scan for us of trends throughout the United States in higher ed. I have put in the chat a link to our web presence around our strategic plan. It's a pretty easy link to remember. It's our website /strategic-plan. In that, you'll see our processes. You'll see the existing strat plan. You'll see the external trends, which, as I reread them last night, are very in concert with all the things Anne has talked about affecting Shady Grove itself. And also different in this process, we are looking at 10 years. Now, a lot of people say a 10-year strategic plan isn't relevant these days, that things change so quickly, that you should be thinking in 3- and 5-year chunks. And we are thinking in a 3-year chunk, another 3-year chunk, and then past that. The reason we wanted to look out 10 years is we acknowledge that there are major trends that are disrupting higher education, which will impact our institutions differently, but are and will continue to impact our institutions. It's not just a question of the demographics of our students, which we are all well aware of. There are trends around the value proposition for higher education, the changing point of view about the value of education beyond high school. And this despite the fact that, as Anne said, I think you said it was 74% of the jobs in Montgomery College, it's 70% nationwide of all future jobs will require education beyond high school. And yet higher education seems to be losing the battle of helping people understand the importance of that, because the value proposition for higher ed has been in decline in people's perception. So how to address that? How to address at a scale level working adults, which will become an ever larger part of our student population, but also address those working adults, not just on a one-by-one basis. In other words, not just thinking about them as an individual student, but thinking about them as a cohort that their employer is interested in educating. And how do we work more seamlessly with employers, not just to understand what they're looking for, but to literally make it easier for them to, I'll just use the term, do business with higher ed. We have some of this in place in the system in bits and pieces. UMGC, for instance, has a number of agreements, starting with the military, which is of course the basis of their initial being, but also more recently some agreements with large corporations around educating their employees. Shady Grove, I think, is a perfect venue for that work as well. But what we have found in looking at that is all of the mores, policies, definitions, business models that work for that fan that wants to come and stay for 4 years. Those things don't work when you're talking about trying to work with an employer to bring tens or hundreds or thousands of students into various programs. So it's not just the educational content, it's the entire business model that needs to be an and, not an or, to what we currently do. And those things, as we look into the future, become a much bigger part of the overall student base that we have to serve. We've talked about it here in Shady Grove a number of times, and this is why Shady Grove is considered by the Regents to be an innovation hub for the system. And this other idea we've talked about is not all higher education has to be a 4-year degree or a master's degree or a PhD. So all of those things are informing the work we're doing to come up with this plan. We are at the point now where we have drafted overall strategic themes in the form of pillars. And we've shared that with the presidents, with the regional center directors, with the board members who are on the work group. Those pillars are not shockingly different from what they've been in the past. When you think about institutions that have lives of hundreds of years, you don't necessarily expect the mission to change every couple of years. So not surprisingly, our pillars of activity center around the access, affordability, and student achievement. So that whole academic and student support area. Research and the impact of research at $1.4 billion of annual research. We do research for knowledge, but we do research for economic impact as well, obviously. And then finally, workforce and economic development. And it's important to note that woven throughout those themes are the foundational elements of innovation and DEI, as well as stewardship of our resources. And I'll say overall, we have recognized that we have the same issue Senator King mentioned, which is communicating the value of what we do in all areas. We need to do a much better job of that. And the Regents actually formed another work group specifically on communications regarding the system that's helping to inform this. We've entered a stage now where we are starting to write while we're still engaging stakeholders. If you go to the website link that I've put in the chat, you'll see that we are soliciting input, not just through focus groups and individual interviews, but also through asking the larger community for input. And we update the artifacts that we're generating so that people can comment on them. Again, I'll just say that our goal is to bring a final draft of the strategic plan to the board in their December board meeting, the Board of Regents, hopefully to get their approval so that we can then start executing and implementing. And with that, Shirley, I will stop and see if there are questions.
Let me open it up to anyone who would like to jump in. Ellen, while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, you shared the visions and I see some of the intersections. Are there going to be parts of the strategic plan that specifically talk about how the regional higher education centers meet that changing business model going forward?
So at the system level, what we typically do is work with all the institutions, and I include the regional center as an institution. And we kind of chicken and egg goals and initiatives. One of the final things we do is put KPIs to the goals. And those KPIs are the result of a negotiation with all the institutions. So what I mean by that is we're very cognizant that the execution of the vast majority of any system level strategic plan, the execution is mostly done at the institutions. And every institution, once the system plan is approved, then has a period of time to go back and look at their strategic plan and look at where the intersections are. But it's really the engagement we do now, and then the work on the how are we going to measure success, where we can hone in on what each institution is willing to do as part of that goal. So it's in that process that we get more granular. As with most things at the system level, we tend to need to keep things broad enough that everyone can see themselves, but also make it so that it is an executable plan. So that's where we'll pull all that together. But Anne and her fellow executive directors have the materials, the latest materials we have, and we're trying to figure out where specifically we should make sure there are those intersections.
I see
And
PJ
Anne
wants,
or Ike or someone, anybody else who's been working on this who wants to jump in if I've misrepresented anything.
well, maybe I'll let PJ jump in with his question and then we can see if there's comments beyond. PJ?
Thank you. Ellen, I think I'm probably about to ask the same question that Shirley just did, but maybe more specific. I went back and looked at previous USM strategic plans, and they had very broad references to regional centers. And it was verbiage like enhanced regional centers, but there was nothing specific. And I know what I'm about to say, you probably hear from each of the now 3 USM regional higher ed centers. Shady Grove is unique. I just, and obviously I'm prejudiced. I think there needs to be more specific, you used the word granularity, in the USM strategic plan about Shady Grove, because it is, as Ann says, not the 13th campus. It's still different, and its success is very dependent on the system and the partner institutions.
So I perhaps can address that and Shirley's comment earlier by giving you an example of what's in a current draft set of goals, where I would see then Anne and her executive director colleagues, as well as the university presidents, then weighing in below the top level goal statement with, and here's how we're going to accomplish that. So for instance, one of our short-term goals, improve transfer pathways and increase student success as a student-centered system of institutions. Another one is leverage the unique assets of the system to deliver access and services to underserved regions and populations. So that's the kind of system level goal statement. And then under that will be a series of initiatives. And some of that work's already underway, by the way. We're not just starting that work, but and that's where I would expect to start to see that granularity, where you would start to see how a regional center is executing in that goal, how an institution is executing in that goal. And it's at that level we would start to put together milestones and measures of success. And those are just 2 of 12 or so under one of the pillars of activities. We've got a little bit more work to do on this draft set of short, medium, and long-term goals. And again, Anne has this document as well, before we'll post that up for further comment. But hopefully that helps with kind of where we'll start to see more specificity.
Ellen, I very much appreciate your sharing with us. And I think we as a board will stay engaged and we'll look for those drafts. It does seem like, and we'll move to this quickly in our agenda, conversations that look beyond institution by institution, right? The whole model of Shady Grove requires there to be a vision across institutions, pathways that are cross-cutting, not the students identified just with one college that they're attending. So I think there is a challenge together collectively in thinking about the new business model that you talk about, and particularly as you shared, when you think about the business wanting to bring in cohorts, no doubt with skill sets that cross degree programs and cross institutions. And that's where we need to invest in, as PJ said, the uniqueness of USG. But I know you know the passion of this board. I appreciate you sharing the link. I will commit to keeping the board updated when drafts are available for comment, and we definitely will take the opportunity to do that. I'm going to pause if there are any other questions. Otherwise, mindful of time, I'm going to move us to what I think is a related part in the agenda as we move forward. Any other questions before I thank Ellen for her presentation? Thank you, Ellen. I'm going to accept this in the spirit of to be continued and appreciate you hearing us. So I want to build on some themes, and I'm going to invite my colleagues in leadership to jump in. As Anne shared, because this year is really about the strategic planning vision, we may be a little bit, we may use our committees in a different way. We may not have quite as many committee meetings as we engage board members in work groups and in other brainstorming around the strategic plan. But our role as Board of Advisors in terms of continuing to support the institution really matters. And I think where I'd like to propose we may have the most impact this year is in the category that Anne referred to as sort of thought leadership. I think we can tell even just from this morning's meeting, we need to be having some different kind of conversations. We need to be thinking outside the box, right? We need to re-examine, as Ellen said, the business model that may not work for the future student that Anne was calling out. And so what I want to propose to you is we as members of the Board of Advisors, what we say to each other all the time, and we said it today and Kevin reinforced it, is how do we raise awareness about USG, right? We know that USG sits at this unique intersection of the Montgomery County educational ecosystem, the workforce needs, and the system. How do we facilitate thoughtful looks ahead and visioning in a way that serves the institution and pick up on the groundwork that the strategic planning process has laid out? And both Ike and Ann mentioned, and those of you who participated in the visioning sessions that were community dialogues found them inspirational. So one thing that the executive committee is suggesting that we want to bring to all of you is this idea that the Board of Advisors together, that we host, that we become a convener for a community learning session. We'll propose some topics, but the idea is that collectively, we pool our energy, we pool our time, and we host a big conversation. Speakers, panels coming in together to really dig into a topic that's very relevant to the vision and to the strategic plan. It would allow us to meet some of our goals about raising awareness, supporting innovation, and connect all our passion to something that can have very direct impact. The role that we would see for Board of Advisor members to help brainstorm about the learning, and we'll start some of that today, to invite participants, to suggest speakers, to facilitate panels, to participate actively, and almost create a way to really seat USG at that intersection and bring the thoughts that are relevant to helping us get to USG 2.0. I'll pause there and let Roya, Kevin, Mike, if anybody wants to jump in before we open it up for questions and discussion.
Thank you, Shirley. I'll just say this just to follow on what I said earlier about how this unique scenario that we've created at USG truly works. What we have here are a group of students who are not necessarily selecting colleges, which I think we focus on in our society. Everybody's worrying about what college they're going to versus what pathway they're on. And what we really ought to focus on, because what USG really does, those kids and adults who are showing up here are focusing on their pathway. The institutions should be thinking about how they support that, and whether they do it individually or with collaboration across the institutions to create the pathways that create our next generation of leaders, technologists, social scientists, researchers. That's what we're trying to do, is create this workforce of the future. And we do that through a collaboration, but we start with the pathways. And I think what USG offers and is focused on is are those pathways?
So Kevin, I'm gonna pause there because that's one of the topics we may talk about. I just first want to sort of vet the idea of having us as the Board of Advisors come together to convene a community-wide conversation.
Yes. Sorry, I got off.
No, that's great. The enthusiasm is very welcome. Any conversation about that?
Just a quick comment behind Kevin. I think, we've talked a lot about the BOA strategy as how we're a group of people who convene the connection between academia, industry, and government. And what Shirley is describing is really the actualization of that concept to bring together, as she said, all of our resources, and then pulling a concept from what Ellen was saying around KPIs, right? So if we have an event that has measurable outcomes, where we can really bring to life the concepts we've been talking about. Why is USG valuable? Why does it convene? Why does it help the students, as Kevin says? Then we're really getting into where the rubber meets the road. I think all of us have participated in a lot of exciting, roundtable discussions in our committees, and now we can bring that to life. Not to mention that we spend a lot of time trying to advocate for ourselves and, explain and explain again and brand. Something like this will do the work for us because it's not just a motivation to, support USG. It's something that serves the mission of each of those three entities that I mentioned, topics that are important to industry, that are important to economic development, and so on. So we can pick this apart more and make it more clear in terms of what objectives and goals we're trying to achieve. But now we're really in the fun part of we've been planning and planning. Let's execute, let's engage. And I think it'll be right on the heels of when everything opens up. So we'll be able to take advantage of that exhilarating excitement that everyone has to get back together in person.
I think I saw Andy Burness's hand up. Andy, if you can hear me, jump in.
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks, Shirley. Sorry about my camera problem. So this is a really good idea. And I want to just pose another thought behind it. The topic of awareness comes up. It's been a main topic since I've been involved with Shady Grove. And it's still out there and people don't know about us and whatever. I think to the extent we can, and it would involve some, I just want to put this out there for the record, it will involve some fundraising to pull this off. I think we need to begin to think in political terms. I think we need to begin to think of USG as a political candidate that is not known and wants to be known enough to be able to win on the ballot. And what does that mean? To me, that is traditional political branding and outreach. And I don't know the details, but if we're going to change from where we are to where we need to be, beyond what we're talking about with the board taking on particular responsibilities and the convenings, and that it's all good, we need to be thinking in completely different terms to saturate the airways. Now, there aren't a lot of airways in Montgomery County in a traditional sense, but whether it's regular ads in Bethesda Magazine, whether it's billboards on 270, whether it's ads on WTOP that people listen to, whether it's a digital strategy that reaches 50,000 households, whether it's a culturally competent outreach strategy where 2 or 3 different groups get hired to reach thousands and thousands of people so that our name recognition, we're not going to do much in a palpably different way if we don't even have name recognition. So I want to put out there that independent of any tactical activities we do, if we can go from a 5% name recognition to a 40% name recognition, I think that'll be really important for us to be able to say that we are representative, that we are an integral part of the county. We can't be an integral part of the county if 12 people in the county know who we are. So I put that out there. This costs money. It's a very different way of thinking, but we've been sort of stuck in this for a while. And I want to say that whatever we do to supplement, that's a good idea, but it's not going to get at the base problem.
Thanks, Sandy. And I think those are, I think that's critical for us to remember. My sense of conversations with Board of Advisor members is as we lead to the conclusion of our strategic plan, once that is set in place, that may be the trigger, Andy, as you say, for thinking very differently. This idea of a conference, and Steve Simon was reminding me in the chat that Montgomery County used to host these major consensus conference. This part of the thought leadership is clearly only one piece. It is not going to get us all the way. And I think, Andy, you're right that we need to think down the road, but it would be maybe a very meaningful way for us collectively to engage. And it would be also very relevant because there would be an opportunity to really dig in on the questions in front of us as USG with our educational ecosystem in the county, as USG as a member of the USM system. So hear you, and I'm still going to propose to folks that we think about this, not as the solution, but as one critical part and a way that we can contribute. So I'm going to ask Steve Simon to throw up a quick Zoom poll for us as a quick way to sort of gauge. I'm going to ask everybody, you'll see a question pop up. Do you see value in the Board of Advisors convening a community conversation? I'm going to ask you to weigh in, and we'll try to get some quick feedback in real time and see where we are. So the question should be popping up on your screen. Please take a minute to participate. And Steve, you will let us know when we've gotten a critical mass. And Steve, I would say if you've gotten,
I'd say you've got a pretty critical mass right there.
All right, let's see the results. Okay, so I appreciate the enthusiasm, recognize that we're not going to convince everyone, but it seems like we have enough of a consensus that what I'd like to do now, with your permission, is suggest to you some possible first topics very related to our strategic plan. We're going to take a few minutes. I'm going to present one, and I'm going to invite Ralph Hall to present one, who also presented for us in the strategic planning process. And then I'd like to sort of spend a little bit of time with you sort of brainstorming which one might make sense first. Kevin actually got us to the place of what I want to propose to you as topic A, which is, we started years ago with research on pathways to prosperity, but I think we collectively, focused on higher education, need to ask some different questions about pathways. And as Kevin was leading us off, and I think this is a conversation Ann and I have had before as well, too often, I think our students spend time on, and we touched on this with Ellen's presentation, asking what college, what institution should I go to, rather than thinking about what's the career pathway that I want to be on, and what's the content and the skill set and the cross-cutting experiences that I need to be successful on that pathway. So pathway is a term, we've used it a lot as Board of Advisor members. We've used it in our joint conversations with the MC Board of Trustees and with the Montgomery County Board of Education. But we need to make that term very real. It can't just be coded. We have to really dig into what it means for students to have different access points to the content and skills that they will need to realize their career vision. And we've collectively talked about seamless pathways, but they have to be seamless from the student point of view. In some of the strategic planning workshops, we've touched on topics like automatic acceptance. What if you are automatically accepted, and then we figured out which of our partners has the courses and which degree matches you better into a 4-year degree program to improve retention? Or what if students could access all the degree applications for all our partners through a single portal on their phone, to make it much easier for students to apply and get into a system in the way that they are used to? And what if, and I think Ellen was referring to this earlier, students could access certificates along the path to a degree so that their experiences and frankly, their earning potential got better and better and better, even before they're completely done. We collectively, I think, need to ensure that pathways are really, and I'm going to borrow some language from community members who participated, fit for purpose pathways, meaning that students get content and skills and hands-on experiences that allow them to improve their opportunities and that enhance their competitiveness when they are all done, and that they are able to put together the cross-cutting list of offerings and the skill sets that are consistent with their career goals. So one proposal, topic A, would be for us to convene, to bring in some speakers, to have some real interaction around what it would mean to make pathways real. So I'm going to ask you to hold that thought as topic A, and I'm going to invite Ralph to jump back in. Ralph has going to share with us topic B, which is we've referenced, and you saw in the Hedgehog, community wealth building. What would that mean as a topic for us as a board? Ralph, I'm going to turn it to you.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can see my slides. Is that right? Yep. Okay, great. So I'm going to spend a few minutes here just doing a quick refresher on community wealth building for those who were not able to attend the workshop. I'll come back to these principles at the end, but essentially some of the main principles behind the idea are for anchor institutions like universities to think about what proportion of their procurement could go to local enterprises who could provide basically goods and services to the university. But it's not just universities, it's local government, it's industry. So acting as a thought leader to bring a network of people together to think about strategic procurement locally would be interesting. If the enterprises don't exist, you could then leverage the university systems through your incubator capacity to create those enterprises. And essentially, the key thing is that those enterprises are broadly owned, that there's sort of an ownership among the workers. And that the last point at the bottom of this list is that these enterprises, cooperatives, are essentially very sustainable in their operations. Now, I'm going to say a few words as to why people are becoming very interested, and especially the future student are becoming very interested in this idea. So if you look at what happened during the year 2000 with the pandemic, globally, about $3.7 trillion was lost from worker earnings, and billionaire wealth increased by about $4 trillion. Essentially, if you didn't have an ownership stake in the economy, you didn't do very well. If you look at wealth by percentile group in the US, this is 92 to today, essentially. What you see is the top 10% of people in the United States own basically 2/3 of the wealth, and this is growing over time. The next 40% own about 1/3, and the bottom 50% of the population essentially own nothing of the total wealth in the nation. And so this is why community wealth building is interesting, is it targets specifically this bottom 50%. Now, in addition to this inequality question, there's also the sustainability of our time on this planet. We've got to be sustainable to ensure we have a future. One interesting model here is the donut model of economics by Kate Raworth. Essentially, the idea is there's a safe space for living in between the sort of social foundation of metrics we want to consider, and then this environmental ceiling, where if we exceed beyond that, we'll create global problems. And if we look at the data on what is currently happening, you can see that in many of the sort of social metrics we're looking at, we're not doing very well at all. And we also, in the environmental space, have exceeded 4 planetary boundaries of the 9 that are being measured. So we're overshooting those, which essentially means system collapse over the long term if we do not radically address what's happening in that space. So the critical challenge then is how to address inequality that really underlies many of these social problems while not worsening pressure on planetary boundaries and actually reducing significantly the pressure that's on those boundaries in these 4 spaces identified. Now, there are a range of economic approaches that can be looked at to do this. This is an interesting one on sort of regenerative economies. If you look at the left and sort of work up the steps, you can sort of think about how green, inherently safe chemistry could be used to feed into more sustainable products and services. which exist within architecture, and then designed communities around sort of a flourishing community. And this could be Shady Grove in your region, right? Then moving up to urban planning and international concerns. Now, a critical thing here, though, which is not mentioned, is ownership. Who owns these elements of the economy? How does that sort of broadly distribute wealth among the population without further concentrating it in the hands of the few, essentially? So this brings me to the hedgehog. And when I look at this, and in the context of everything I've just said, I see economic development for the public good being sort of the link to the sustainability aspect. And then under the vision, you have equitable sort of economics for the future, which directly addresses the equity piece. So you actually have both of these elements, the economy addressing inequality, and then a new type of economic activity that leans into sustainability. And my final comment here, when looking at the flywheel, was the notion of the future student. And if you look in the middle here, I've just added the Gen Z and now Gen Alpha who are emerging. And the challenging comment here is that the younger the student or the person, the more they're shifting to the left, meaning they're shifting towards socialism, they're shifting towards a real concern about inequality and the collapse of environmental systems. And that's going to be, I would argue, the future student you'll need to serve, students that are looking and demanding education in this space of regenerative design and but fundamentally addressing inequality. So I guess I'll leave it there and open up for questions, and I'll share the link to this slide, which also has support material in the slide as well. All of the images connect to the original source material so that people can explore that as well.
Thank you, Ralph. So we recognize that this is just a quick taste intentionally, because what we want to do is open up for some conversation among board members. This is not so much an either or, but which of these things do you think is more of a priority? And we will then lean on our executive committee to sort of flesh it out and bring you back more of a detailed framework. But before I invite in other voices, let me say two things. We've spent a good bit of time this morning, both in Anne's presentation and Ellen's, saying we need to think differently about higher education. So we really do. We won't get there if we don't engage in the thinking, and that's part of the purpose. And, thinking about what do pathways really mean, and we mean disruption here, right? We mean really thinking differently from the time you begin to engage students. Back in MCPS, all the way through Montgomery College or other community colleges through USG, what it really means to think about pathways. And as Ralph was challenging, really understanding how higher education institutions can drive investment in the community, both through vendors we use, how we invest in the actual institution, but also preparing the future workforce and change the trajectory of community wealth for them as citizens of our county. So these are very critical topics to thinking differently, which is why we put them out there. But we're giving you the quickest little taste, but want to open up for some push and pull. Do they resonate? Which one maybe feels more urgent? We will give you a chance to weigh in on that, but love to hear any reactions. Eric?
Okay, thanks. No, those are really, really good ideas. I think they're very exciting. To me, they one is certainly a lens about higher ed, like how do people experience it and go through it. And to me, that's more of a learning exercise. So that's what I would see as more like setting a stage. Maybe that would probably still be first for those parts of the stakeholder group to just be exposed to newer ideas and concepts of higher ed in the ways you're expressing it. But to me, that'd be a very more tactical and just how administrative systems, for lack of a better word, work. I really enjoyed the second one. And I think that one's much more innovative and far-reaching. So this idea of sustainability, circular economy, the donut economy is coming. It is everywhere. And it's not a simple type of question to look at. And what's good about it, using that kind of topic and layering pathways on top of that, how does it work? You need social scientists, economists, scientists, all the rest, politicians. And so what is an educational system that supports that kind of transformation is really big. So my worry for that is that might be too big and the first one might be too small. So in between, maybe there's a way to link it. So anyway, that's my first reaction.
I'm just going to pause, Michael, before I let you in. Ralph, I don't know if you wanted to address the, is it too big question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great observation. I think the way I would approach it is sort of baby steps into it, right? So I could imagine a conversation with local government, with industry leaders, with community groups around the idea, gauge their interest and enthusiasm. Each location around the world where this approach has been applied is very unique to that location. So there isn't one model you can apply it sort of here and just say, we'll take Preston, we'll take Cleveland, and we'll just drop it here and make it work. It won't work. So it absolutely has to be a sort of a network-based approach. And I think the reason it aligns nicely with USG is you are naturally a network. And so I think this group consists of all of the major elements of the puzzle. And so if you reach out to your partners and bring them into that conversation, I think you could carve out a piece of this that is manageable, right? You don't need to take the whole thing on. But one very well-crafted first strategic step, I think could help actually do a lot of the things I've been hearing about today, put sort of USG in the media, in terms of convening this as a thought leader. I can imagine big donors getting interested in this, putting money on the table to incubate sort of new businesses, new enterprises into existence. And that's kind of how this approach works in many regions around the world.
Thanks, Ralph. I think, part of what you saw on the flywheel is the recognition that this will take investment, and understanding how that investment inures to the community's greater good is part of what would underlie this, but I appreciate the question. Michael.
So Ralph, I truly appreciated the insight that your slide deck brought. I think it's extremely important for us to understand the students, not only in the future, but actually right now, today. And there's two big words that have stuck out for me today: innovation and disruptive. If you think about it, going back to why Uber was successful is because people didn't want to wait for a cab. Or why did Walmart disrupt most of the general small stores in America? Is because they were able to get cheap resources quickly at a lower price. But now Amazon is taking them to task. And I only mention those examples in the sense that today for our students, the real impact is that the books that most of our students are paying cost as much as the degree itself, the time for the degree. But most of those resources are open source. You can get them almost an exact copy of that in many cases for free. So when we look at innovation, it's extremely important for us to look at, what does a student want? They want to have the ability to find education when and where they want, and they want to find that content for the cheapest available resource to get them through it. Because again, they're working jobs, they're taking care of kids. So I just want to comment on that we have to actually think a lot about where we are today, because we don't have a lot of time. We have maybe in the matter of years at the most.
Appreciate that reminder on the urgency, Michael. I think that's very right. Debbie, and then Jorge.
Sorry about that. It takes a minute to unmute. I just wanted to say I thought Ralph's presentation was really interesting, and from some of the work that the county executive's been interested in and that the county's been interested in, I wonder if there's some sort of project that could involve USG students and professors, faculty, whatever, that could really get people excited about some of what's extraordinary about USG. I mean, it was a really interesting way to think about it. So I would love to help brainstorm and figure out if that would work, or if there's something that we could move forward with.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. We'll definitely follow up on that. Jorge?
Hi, thanks. So one aspect is, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, the focus on the prospective student. When we look at the generation, the choices that they will be making are going to start to be influenced during middle school. So if we, and the challenge that we have, the strength that we have is that we have many partnerships and many stakeholders. The challenge is that in all of that, the risk that we run in trying to pay attention to all the partnerships, that we lose that relentless focus on who is our primary customer. So the person that will be enrolling and how they're making decisions, whether there is awareness or not awareness, I think that that's kind of the second step. The first one is, are we on the radar screen and how can we be there? So all of that can shape the strategy into making sure that we don't dilute effort into trying to pay attention to too many partners and other voices other than the student, the prospective student and their family.
Thank you, Jorge. Not at all a broken record. Important for us to keep our focus. I'm going to ask Steve Simon to just put up a quick poll for us. You've heard some conversation. This is a first, not an either or. I'm going to ask folks to weigh in. If the Board of Advisors was going to convene our first community conversation to really dig in, where would you recommend that we begin? If you would weigh in on that. And I'll ask Steve to, when he's got a critical mass, to sort of share back with us the feedback. And the last question for you that will come up when we're done with this one before you leave is, I just want to get a sense of the level of enthusiasm for the work. So we're going to give you a last chance to share some thoughts with us. But I do not at all underestimate that these are things to really delve into. We're not thinking about one keynote speaker who gives us his or her insights and then we're done. Craig, why don't I let you jump in and then I'll ask Steve to share the results.
Well, thank you very much, guys. And let me just say that I think that last question is actually a trick one, because pathways is community wealth building. For me, as a county leader, those pathways are the key to community wealth building. And let me just say that again, I think that our first topic should be, because we're talking about COVID recovery, how does USG play a role in terms of making that happen? And you alluded to that at the very beginning of this conversation. And thank you, Shirley, for highlighting that from the council's perspective, because that's exactly where we are. USG and Montgomery College and MCPS are uniquely poised as our education centers to make sure that we get our folks back on track. And a key to this is, when talking about the students and talking about what's there, we have to understand that everything has changed. Education has changed. Workforce development has changed. Even things like our currency are starting to change. Things we thought would never, ever evolve. And the reality is that Bitcoin and others have taken over from a worldwide perspective. So there is nothing that is sacred any longer, including the method in which we are instructing. And there are plenty of parents and students that are out there that are thinking about what's the quickest, most efficient, and cheapest way in which I can get my children on that pathway to that next step. And so we again have to be mindful of that. And I love the reference that was made before about Walmart and Amazon, because that's what it is. Long gone are the days where folks are shopping in Neiman Marcus and Bloomingdale's and Saks all the time. That's gone. What they're looking for is the cheapest method of which to get high quality goods. That's the reason why Amazon beat out Walmart. It wasn't because their goods are cheaper, it's because they're faster. And so it's all of those things together that come together that really make a difference for us. And we need to be mindful of that community and societal mindset. And we need to start thinking about how we deliver education in that same realm. Because if we don't, we're going to get lost. And folks in this Gen Alpha generation are going to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to go to school because school isn't relevant. I can tell you that when I talk to my daughter, who is 15 years old, about to be 16, who already has started her business as a baker, who has online Instagram orders that come in, who'll be traveling to Pennsylvania this weekend for a baking show, these are the kinds of things where I'm talking about. That's what's happening in our generation that's right before us. And so she's not talking about, oh, I'm sorry, you may have lost me.
No, I hear you. You finish your thought.
So I'm going to shut up there, but yes. So pathways.
Okay, well, to your point, Craig, Steve just put up the poll, and there's a general consensus that it's pathways, but your point is well taken. These topics are not really disconnected. There is a connection, and in thinking about pathways, understanding the post-COVID world and how it's different, I think those are critical suggestions. So thank you very much for that feedback. This is something that we will, there really is a way. Everybody who serves on the board has come to the service in part inspired by our students, in part inspired by our institution, but with professional and personal experiences that we can really tap into in our role as thought leaders. This is really a way that we're going to come to each of you to think about how you engage and connect with us. I'm going to ask Steve Simon to put up the last question while I'm sharing some final thoughts. This is really going to be an opportunity. I know we often ask ourselves, as I do as a member of the board, how can I be value add here? And we are going to come to you to think about, who are you in conversation with who might have relevant thoughts? What are the questions you want to be sure we ask? Who else might you bring in who'd be interested in participating with USG in this kind of conversation? How will you help us facilitate? So I'm asking you to think about and make a personal commitment to participate with us as we move forward. And I will, with that, on my quick summary of the next steps for us is, we will be convening some of our committees, but we will be aligning with the strategic planning work. We're going to be reaching out to some of you individually for work groups, for brainstorming, to talk with Ann one-on-one, as well as coming back to you on the bread and butter of the board, like the mentoring and other work we do. And then we will ask our executive committee to really frame out how we begin to assume this convener role. Let me pause there for any final thoughts, and then I'll ask Steve to close us with our last poll results. Any other comments or concerns? Appreciate everyone's time. Nancy, thank you for your message.
Shirley,
Right.
I'll just, I'll just say, I think Eric's insight was really interesting about the scale and scope of both of those topics. And to Craig's great insight that pathways are community wealth building. It may be that the community wealth building conversation is a longer one that is a broader frame, and that there's a series of other conversations within that as well. So I don't want us to lose sight of that connection that both Craig and Eric have highlighted, and that might be some way to think about the first convening as well.
And I think what we might do is bring those to our executive committee, and as they begin to shape this, really take into account whether we sequence it, whether this is a series, how we address that. Totally agree. Charles, I see your hand up.
Yes, something that was mentioned this morning is that there are folks coming from Montgomery County Community College, and that there are courses that were not accepted by some of the programs at the partner institution. This cannot be. If they're coming from Montgomery, those courses must be tailored and they must be accepted by this, because it's a waste of time. We're talking about expediting the pathways to be able to get their degree and contribute to society. Those courses must be closely aligned to what the membership institution are actually offering. So I think that is priority one. That has to stop. I can't do 3 or 4 courses and pay a lot of time and then come in to only tell me that those courses are not relevant. To me, this is outrageous.
So Charles, I think that really picks up the theme that we've heard from several members of the board this morning. It has to be student-centric. It has to work. It has to be meaningful. It has to be seamless. And we can't just keep saying that. We actually have to make that real. So very much appreciate that. All right, Steve Simon, show us the results, and then we'll see if there's any other. Excellent. That's why I love this board of advisors, the enthusiasm, the passion, the energy. There is work to do and room for everyone to be engaged. Any last words for the good of the order before I thank you and say have a wonderful day? Thank you to Ann and Ike for the strategic work they're leading. Thank you to all my officers on the Board of Advisors for your support and participation. And thank you to all the members of the board. We have a lot to do this year, even as we are still visioning and thinking, and I appreciate knowing that you're there. Have a wonderful day, everyone. We'll be talking soon.
You all.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Stay safe, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.